You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show with some very special, interesting information, we hope, which has just been breaking in the last kind of week and a bit. And we brought in our special friend, Ben Emlyn-Jones. But first, I'll introduce Andy Chaplin. Welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show, Andy.
Hello, Neil. How you doing?
We're fine. Are you getting on right in the sun? Is it too hot for you? Or you been cooling down? Or
It's too warm for me. I'm more of a temperate or a cool person rather than a warm. Loads of people love warm weather. Like, a little bit warm is okay, but it's getting muggy and oppressive now. We need a thunderstorm, so that's what I'm after.
Yeah, they've been talking about thunderstorms tonight, actually. It has rained a bit today, so maybe that might happen. I kind of feel it in the air, as it were.
Yeah.
But things are hotting up in other areas, so that's why we brought in our special guest for this evening. That's Ben Emlyn-Jones. Welcome back, Ben.
Hello.
Ben. Hello, Andy. Hello, Neil. Thanks for inviting me back. And I mean, in all modesty, you've chosen the perfect person for this kind of subject, I must say. It's these are really amazing times, and it's a very, very exciting situation has emerged. It's happened very suddenly. It was not really expected at that point. It was just obviously this sort of thing has been expected now for a few months since the Gillibrand Amendment came into force. This is the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, which once that came into law. Which it did, I believe, on Boxing Day. There was always a possibility that something like this would happen, because what that amendment does is it could function as essentially a truth and reconciliation piece of legislation when it comes to things such as UFOs. What she's basically saying is anyone involved in UFO projects who took security oaths would no longer be obliged to keep these things confidential, keep whatever was in their non-disclosure agreement confidential, so long as they revealed it properly. In other words, they could reveal it to Congress. It doesn't mean they could just go and tell all their mates, but it did mean that they could testify before Congress, which has happened now.
So to clarify, then we got this story of this guy called David Grusch, is that his name?
Grusch, yes, David Charles Grusch, or
Grusch, and he is was part of the American Air Force. I don't know if he was Air Force.
He was in the US Air Force for a while, but then he actually moved more recently to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. Excuse me. And he, for 2019, he was actually involved with the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the infamous UAPTF, or ARROW as it is now called. And he was actually involved in the report, the famous 2022 UAPTF report. He was actually involved in creating that. So what happened was he left government service in April of this year, became an estate agent. And when he did so, he contacted the journalist Ross Coulthart, an Australian journalist who specialises in UFOs, and said, I've got things I want to talk to you about. I don't have any documented proof of this, and I can't give you documented proof because I've put in a formal complaint with the Department of Defence Inspector General. I've got a lawyer who's a former Inspector General. But I want to make a complaint about the kind of material I've had to deal with and the secrecy behind it, which I think is unlawful. It's unconstitutional. So I want to talk to you about it, even though I can't prove it. And so Coulthart did a big interview with him, there's been a few clips published, but this is going to go live at the time we're recording Sunday evening. It's going to go live apparently in the early hours of tomorrow morning.
It's just classic, isn't it? Really, because the everything to do with 9/11 and Iraq and Afghanistan was cloaked behind this wall of secrecy. Oh, it's national security, can't talk about it. Oh, national security, can't talk about it. So anything they don't want to talk about, they just throw up national security, which could mean anything really. It's just a broad, dragnet spectrum, and it's a perfect way of shutting it down. But Ben, do you think there's something slightly, I don't know about the word sinister, but slightly fishy about suddenly all the news outlets are saying, well, actually, yes, aliens do exist, and there are people seeing aliens everywhere. And now the government whistleblowers are saying, oh, actually, yeah, we have got crashed down, alien aircraft, all at the same time. It's just a little bit Project Bluebeamish for me.
Well, this has been going on now since 2017, since December 2017, when Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal published their famous New York Times article. And since then, you're right. It's as if this is not obviously disclosure didn't happen on that day, but a policy which was over for 75 years. It was actually 75 years and 5 months. A policy came to an end, and we can time it very precisely because we can date it to the sending of the Cutler Twining memo in July of 1947, in which Admiral Roscoe Hillencutter, the first head of the CIA, actually stated that UFOs should be treated in the media with official ridicule and denial. And that's indeed what we got for all that time. And then suddenly it changes. For whatever reason, it changes. And why it's changed is the important thing. Is it because there is some kind of division within the establishment and some that actually want disclosure? Or is it some kind of psychological operation leading to some kind of fake disclosure, which will just drag us deeper and deeper into whatever kind of future regime the establishment has planned? That's the very, very important question to ask. Yeah, and this could be a part of the latter. I hope not, but it could be, and this is something you've got to be on our guard against.
Richard Dolan said something interesting because he was kind of reading out this report as it came in as he was actually at a UFO conference. The news broke whilst he was on the sort of third day of a UFO conference.
That's the place to be, isn't it?
Yeah. That was literally hot off the press. And so he said, why is this story of downed craft being released now? And he said, well, it could mean that there's someone somewhere that thinks there's some money to be made out of it. Now, that's not to say on a commercial value for entertainment purposes, like let's make movies and videos and interviews and magazines, but actually from the technology he was speaking about, like could we re-engineer the craft and someone in the aviation industry, the defense industries, make some money out of it in some way. But then again, if you think back to it, we've had stories of downed craft going around for years. Different authors have alluded to it in various books over the years. And of course, there's the Roswell story from 1947, which was always the big one that people referred to as a down craft. And supposedly Corso in his book the day after Roswell talked about how he was involved, Lieutenant Corso, how he was involved in the farming out of this Roswell technology, the crashed UFO technology, out to the industry. He didn't necessarily say what it was. I think it was a foreign intelligence division sort of saying this is captured foreign technology. That's what they were told. And you can do with it what you can, make as much money as you want from it, he was told, or he said to them. And but basically give us the results back. We want everything you've found, and we need to sort of see what you've done, because obviously they're not going to hand out this technology to any private company and expect nothing in return. They want their experts and their research to come back with what they could do with it as well.
Yeah, this is basically, indeed, you're right. Lots and lots of people have been talking about this for a very, very long time and writing about it and swearing it's true. What's amazing about Grusch's testimony is it's completely unequivocal. It's one-dimensional, it's simple, and it's blunt. He doesn't and ah at all about it. He says, and when Coulthard asked him, what have you actually gathered? And he said, extraterrestrial spacecraft and the corpses of non-human pilots. He actually said that. And every single word he said, in just the clips I've seen so far, these highlights, have been a confirmation of everything conspiratorial ufologists have been saying for decades. And we've been laughed at. And now suddenly this guy comes along and he's not sort of like shrugging his shoulder. He's very different to Elizondo, who said, well, yes, but I can't say too much about it. I can't really confirm or deny that. He's saying, oh no, this is what it is. it's a strangely sort of like big print style statement, and that to me makes me wonder. Well, again, there's only two. What could it be? It could be a stage. He could be a herald of some real declassification, big disclosure, or it could be some kind of psyop. It could be several things. Or it could be he's completely lost his mind, and he has decided to commit professional and social suicide. That's another possibility. Although he's doing it in a very elaborate way. As for hiring solicitors, going through the to DOPSA, the Department Defense, what's it called, pre-publication review, and things like that. Because he's been described as a whistleblower, and that's actually inaccurate. He's not a whistleblower. He is cooperating fully with the authorities through which he previously worked. And they have given their approval of what he's saying. This doesn't mean they say what he's saying is true. They're just stating that what he says does not breach any. It does not breach anything. It doesn't breach anything classified. And the skeptics have interpreted this in a very simplistic and ungenerous way, saying, well, the reason it doesn't breach anything is because, well, these things don't exist anyway, so they're just going to let him, they're just going to rubber stamp his folly. Or, that's one way of looking at it, or it could be that this is, like I said, a herald to a declassification on their part. See what I mean? So it could be that instead. So, yeah.
I mean, Bob Lazar comes to mind from the early 90s or the late 80s when he was coming out as a supposedly a guy that worked on back engineering flying saucers in S4, part of the Dreamland kind of what do they call it? That area 51 type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that lends credence to what Bob Lazar spoke about all those years back?
Well, I mean, Grusch is the first person since Bob Lazar first came out in 1989 to speak about this sort of thing so explicitly. You know, he presumably has had to sign the same secrecy oaths as Lou Elizondo. Yet Lou Elizondo is very, very cautious whenever he says anything about anything. He treads very carefully, whereas Grusch does not. Now, Elizondo knows Grusch, and in fact, he congratulated him when he first came out, when he did his first interview. There's an interview came out in the Debrief as well, which is like it deals with military and technology and things like that. It's an online magazine. We still know what's happening now is we're waiting for the big interview tomorrow, waiting for this to hit the headlines. It has been covered by all the major mainstream media outlets, but only a sort of page 10 and 12 stories. So at some point, probably there's going to be a Daily Star headline, you know.
But at least it's not the typical one, which was what's that magazine? The US magazine, the National Enquirer.
You said you were talking out of Uranus and things like that. You know,
yeah,
it'll be some kind of headline like that. But at some point, it's going to hit the headlines. And there's what's happening now is there's already moves afoot to start congressional hearings, like the ones we've just had, but they're going to be very, very different because I really can't see how they can have the kind of hearings they've had up till now with just Gillibrand and Kirkpatrick sitting around a table. There's going to have to be people have to be sworn in. It's going to have to structure, and I can't imagine they can have a public hearing without Grusch himself testifying. I think he's going and he wants to testify, which means that he's
really not going to get any guys dressed up in alien suits again like we did in the night.
Or like in Arizona,
Phoenix
Lights,
yeah.
That's fine. It's interesting you brought that up actually, because Fife Symington, he was the governor of Arizona at the time. He's admitted now he lied. He said I was lying because I didn't want to start a panic, but it wasn't just flares. Something really big flew over the city that day. I saw it, but I couldn't tell people that because I thought they'd be rioting in the streets, people fleeing the city, things like that. Yeah, and he has confessed. The question is probably there's many others who have done something similar and not confessed.
So the fact is that he's gone on record and says the US and other countries, it's not just the US, have recovered extraterrestrial alien technology, downcraft. Why are we all suddenly sitting up and taking notice of him now? I mean, when we've had these stories circulating in UFO books for years, we've had Stephen Greer movies with witness testimonies talking about the very same thing. Why is everybody sitting up and taking notice now?
It could be to the nature of the man himself, his background, the fact that he was involved within the establishment, including the UAPTF, and also the fact that he is speaking in such an explicit tone. I mean, he's received far more attention actually than Lou Elizondo. Probably because of the nature of what he's talking about. And no doubt there's going to be massive body language and analysis and statement analysis done on him. You know, Richard D. Hall is polishing his magic wand right now, you know. Peter, but there's probably going to be a lot of that. The skeptics have already hit back, but they've hit back in quite a half-hearted way, and there's about 5 different points they keep repeating, and they've all been discredited by people, including me. And then now they've sort of gone quiet. Mick West has kind of like gone a bit quiet now. He did an interview with News Nation.
So if Stanton Friedman was around today, the late Stanton Friedman, what do you think he would be saying? Because they'd be rushing to him to interview him, wouldn't they?
Oh, I miss that guy so much. And I wish he had survived to see this. He'd be basically saying pretty much what is on my T-shirt, actually. Can I show you my T-shirt?
Sure.
I'm wearing a very appropriate T-shirt this evening. Let me just get a picture of my own camera. It has a little flying saucer there, you see. Yeah. It has the words, "Told you so." I thought I'd wear that deliberately.
So the thing is, Ben, that could apply to so many things.
Well, it's got the flying saucer. Yeah, well, it could apply to other things as well. Yeah, yes, I mean...
the jib jabs and all sorts.
It could, yeah, exactly. I mean,
just change the image at the top and it covered everything. Yeah,
exactly. I think there are T-shirts like that as well. Yeah. But, so yeah, Stanton would be he'd be over the moon. He'd be really enthralled. He probably would be interviewed by a lot of people. I know the people who are involved in exopolitics now are those who have commented to the media have they've been basically saying this is kind of like what we've been telling you this was going to happen. It has happened. This is the product. It's probably a very, very good sign that the Gillibrand Amendment is doing its job. And the next stage, I think, is the hearings. It's more investigation, more interviews, and slowly but surely this sequence. An ideal solution would be for within the next couple of months, all the information that the government has been keeping secret about UFOs to come out. That's an ideal solution. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. We've got to be cautious that this will something will happen to scupper this. I don't know, but there's probably I know for a fact there's some kind of conflict going on within the establishment because the White House have said absolutely nothing. Now this happened before. Do you remember ObjectGate? Did we do a show about that? About the shoot downs of various things?
Right.
Oh, this is the balloons.
You're following the balloons. Well, there was a balloon shot down.
About the balloons, yeah.
Yeah, there was one balloon shot down. Then there were 4 other objects. They refused to call them anything other than objects that were downed over the US and Canada. Now, basically, the Department of Defense was doing lots and lots of press conferences where they were talking about this. The White House said absolutely nothing. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, made a joke about how she liked the film E.T., and that was it. Then, the following Thursday, it was actually a whole week later, so President Biden finally sort of hobbled out on the stage and did a few things and then hobbled back. Biden said absolutely nothing. Jean-Pierre herself was actually asked this question at a press conference. Someone said, if we're not, would you tell us? Are you going to tell us? Alleging the U.S. military has been retrieving craft of non-human origin for several days. Now, what she said was, I think you should refer that question to the Department of Defense and let them answer it. And then that was the end of the subject.
Then they'll say no comment, and that's the end of that.
They were, but the thing is, it's weird that also Susan Goff she actually said that there was no evidence at all, etc., that this has been going on. But basically, this indicates that the White House, that is the U.S. federal executive, is not really involved in this.
Yeah,
they're coming out with a very different message to the DoD, and that's the Pentagon and the military establishment, and they come out with a very, very different message, and it's a very brief and really non-meaningless message. I said President Biden hasn't said a word. She said she told the reporter to go and ask the DoD. Don't ask me. I'm only the press secretary for the guy who runs the country.
Yeah.
Indicating that this indicates, I think, that there's
the commander in chief does nothing.
The commander in chief of the military, and he doesn't. I'm sure he's not the one making the decisions. He's the figurehead when he can stand on his feet. Yeah. But whoever's running the White House right now has nothing to do with this. They're not involved in this, and they probably have. This has all come out without their authorization.
Well, this is all I mean, these things are being kept under wraps, so it's said, for decades, through different administrations. And it's like only some of those administrations appear to be read into what's going on. Maybe Reagan was given a brief at the time. There has been a book, I think, about what presidents are told or what they know. Jimmy Carter allegedly sighted a UFO. Reagan had cited one.
Did Reagan say when he watched E.T., he said, if only the world knew how real this was, or something?
Yeah, that's what Steven Spielberg alleged to happen when they had a special screen of E.T. at the White House. He overheard Reagan either say to him or someone that there's only so many people in this room that know the real truth of what's going on, or something like that, wasn't it?
It's remarkable exactly how united up until now, basically up until the last couple of years, that the political classes of the world have been behind this topic. As you say, it doesn't matter which party happens to be in power at the time in the United States. It also doesn't matter which country you're in, because Grusch actually said, our allies are also involved in this. Our allies have a materials recovery program, and presumably adversarial countries like China and Russia also do. In fact, I know for a fact Russia does. Russia, ever since the Soviet era, has had a very, very productive, harvest of this kind of thing. And the thing is, this policy has not actually been. No one's deviated from this policy ever until basically December 2017. For example, in Brazil, when there was a UFO crash retrieval in 1996 in Brazil, and the Brazilian authorities immediately capitulated to the U.S. administration. The U.S. sent a plane over that landed at an airport without authorization. The air traffic controller was really angry about it. And they said, no, just let it land. And they said, but it's dangerous. We could have planes taking off on that runway. I said, no, just let it come down. The Americans just waded in. This was an invasion of Brazil, essentially. They said, they went straight to the military base where this material had been taken, like debris and a couple of bodies, and they just whisked it off to the United States. It's very humiliating for the Brazilians, actually. They were very upset about that. This pattern is repeated around the world. It's something else happened in South Africa that was very similar, and there's many, many others. It's happened in this country. And this goes back a long way. For example, funny thing is, Elizondo alluded to this, but in a very... You see, Grusch did an interview with a French newspaper where he talked about something that was actually written about on the Black Vault had a guest article by Roberto Panotti called The Fascist UFO Files. It's a very dramatic title. And it refers to an incident in Magenta in 1933, Magenta, Italy, where three objects actually came down, a cigar-shaped object and two saucers. And these were basically, there was a Roswell-style incident. This was more than 15 years before Roswell in another country. And in 1945, when the Mussolini regime fell in Italy, the Americans basically stole it and took it to the United States. And this is what Grusch talked about. It's really quite something.
Talking about the Second World War, there's also a quote, I think, from Winston Churchill about these alleged Foo Fighters. And we're not talking about the music band here. They were named after this. But the Foo Fighters were these strange objects that pilots claimed to see whizzing about in the skies as they were battling the Germans and the Japanese in the Second World War. And Winston Churchill, we got to think back then, like UFOs weren't really a thing, aliens weren't really a thing, so they didn't really know what they were. I suppose you had War of the Worlds slightly earlier, but it was kind of not really in the public consciousness as much as they are now. And Winston Churchill said it was, I think from memory, a high priority to find out what these Foo Fighters were. And then it just got buried and nobody ever talked about it again.
Yeah, he had a special project run by the RAF from 1942. And he said that the priority was so high, he said that this must not be released to the public. And you know what he was afraid of? He said he was afraid that the general public, there will be nationwide panic if this got out. And this was at a time. Sorry, Andy, but this was at a time when we had bombs dropping on our heads.
Yeah.
We had rationing. We didn't know Hitler could be landing at Dover any day now. We had our fathers, our sons, our brothers going off to foreign fields to die. People were dying in their homes. Yet, and the British people, we cope with that with enormous stoicism and bravery. Yet Churchill was afraid we would panic if we knew about this.
He was, I think one of the things was he was also worried about religion being upset as well.
Now, this was echoed actually by the Brookings Institute many years later in 1959. That somehow the churches wouldn't survive if we knew we were not the only intelligent being in the universe. I doubt that, actually. I think the churches will be absolutely fine. They coped with Darwin and his impact. They can cope with anything.
There's also this theory of when was the radio show for War of the Worlds?
1938.
1938. And there's this theory that it was actually a test run to see how the public would react to they knew it was false, obviously, a real alien invasion, and people were going out with rifles shooting at water towers and things like that. So do you think that probably had an impact on Churchill's summation that people would panic?
Yeah, it may not have been created for that purpose, but you bet all the psychological warfare operatives at that time were interested in people's reaction. I mean, Orson Welles, the director, ended up in court over the matter.
Did he?
Yeah, he had to go to court.
What was he charged with?
Oh, I can't remember what it was all about, but he was charged with something serious. So as a result, and you can bet that the people's responses to that, which, as you said, was there was a lot of nationwide panic. People were getting into their cars and driving out of the cities. They were raiding shops. There were all kinds of things were going on when they heard this radio show, which was a piece of docudrama. It was a fiction, and you can bet people thought, right, if we ever say anything real like this is going on, it doesn't have to be invasion. It could just be, as the Brookings report said, it could be like debris on other planets, ancient ruins on the moon or Mars. They probably thought, well, we don't want this to happen, because you see, the political classes have a very low opinion of the general population. I don't think we would panic. I think most people would probably be pretty indifferent to it, actually.
I think right now, because there's been so much predictive programming in terms of the movies and programs, and everyone's seen Ancient Aliens, I think most people's reaction would be, yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
Well, you see, this is
Yeah.
maybe.
Go on, Ben.
So I was going to say that may be the purpose behind some of these programs, or certainly people who watch these programs. They'll have been carefully monitored. Public reactions to these programs will have been carefully monitored.
Yeah. Getting back to the Foo Fighters, I recall reading, I think, in a Timothy Good book about Foo Fighters. There was one report, if I remember it correctly, where a Lancaster bomber had one of these Foo Fighters, one of these small red spheres, glowing spheres, or whatever they were described as, actually coming up through the bomb bay doors that are open and flying around the inside of the fuselage of the bomber, and then flew out again. It was seen by all the people inside the Lancaster bomber. So they were very curious.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because obviously the Foo Fighters varied in size. Some of them were structured craft of a particular size, but some of them were literally just small spheres. That's right, small balls of light. And obviously they have abilities that human aircraft don't have. This is one of what Elizondo calls the 5 observables.
So I've come across a report. There's 2 reports. Actually, there's quite a few reports that I'm coming across that I put on my Facebook timeline. So this is one from Gloucestershire Live. Red Arrows display at air show joined by, quote, alien aircraft at West Country Air Show. I've dropped a link in the chat so you guys can have a look at that. It looks like some weird object that has decided to join the Red Arrows for their display. But also I came across, and this is even more bizarre. Let's have a look. Here we are. So this is in America. It always seems to happen in America. And it is the Daily Star, but it has been reported in other places. And there is a video as well. UFO filmed crashed in garden before panicked 9/11 call. And you actually see the green kind of ball of light land to the earth. But here's where it gets interesting. And then they saw an 8-foot figure looking at us.
Ooh. Yeah, that's I mean, I have a very low opinion of that particular story, the second one. The first one, though, is really quite extraordinary. Now, this is not the first.
Why would you have a bad opinion on the second one before we get onto the first one?
All right, it's because there's some suggestion that the young boy who phoned the police and came up with this idea, actually was trying to create a bit of viral marketing for his NFTs. He was making alien-style NFTs.
So it could be a hoax, possibly.
Yeah, and then, I can't remember all the details right now, but I wrote a little article about it because I was talking to several people about it. And also, I mean, it happened on May the 1st, and it wasn't actually published for 5 weeks. And I can't help feeling that George Knapp, who actually works for that particular news station, probably thought, well, publish it now because you'll have a better reception than it would. And the guy, the thing is, he uploaded a video at the same time on his YouTube channel, which indicates that he had foreknowledge of that. I don't know for certain. It appears there was something in the garden, and the people sound genuinely scared.
Yeah.
But that's for the Red Arrow things. That's interesting because there was something similar happened at the Platinum Jubilee last year.
It did. Yeah.
What's weird about that time was 2 separate camera angles captured the object. There was a white sphere, a small white sphere, probably about 4 or 5 feet across. And you know what? Because it was captured, because 2 camera angles captured it, it could be triangulated to its actual position. And got a good range on it.
Speed and everything like that.
Yeah. And it was very odd because it was not moving like any kind of balloon or drone or anything like that. I mean, drones would never be permitted to fly during a Red Arrow display. I mean, that would be deadly.
Yeah.
That'd be absolutely, oh, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Mate. Yeah.
So what I can see is a very small white dot in the red trail of the coloured smoke coming out. Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Yes. And that was captured from another camera angle on the ground.
Yeah.
They know exactly where it was. Yeah. It's about 4 feet across. It's and it was moving in a way that is, I say, indicates it was not. Well, firstly, as you say, it's not. Drones wouldn't be permitted to fly at that time. It'd be very, very dangerous with the red arrows going over.
And anyone kind of like wanting to view this, do have a look at it. So for the first one, red arrow display at air show joined by alien aircraft, West Country Air Show. That's Gloucestershire live. And then Unilad. I don't know what people's view on the reliability of that, but Unilad, you certainly do see the photo of it, and you certainly do see the video. I'm watching the video of it right now, and very clearly you can see an object that really shouldn't be there. As Ben says, it would be too dangerous. And it seems to be joining again the red arrows. Again, the red arrow.
They're interested. They do this with our aircraft. And for example, on the maiden flight of Concorde in 1973, well, it was just being tested. I mean, didn't have any passengers on board. It just had the test pilots. Used just a similar object, actually, a white spherical object, comes alongside the aircraft. You know how fast they fly. It
appears in the window, doesn't it?
Yes, and you can see it actually circling around the aircraft. This was captured on film. You can see it. It's on YouTube. It was as if someone was checking out our new aviation technology, and it was not. It clearly was not some kind of foreign aircraft, because they don't have anything like that.
There was also an incident, and I've seen it on some of these programs, where it was a Russian helicopter air display back in the early 90s, and they were kind of flying in formation over Moscow or wherever it was, and you could clearly see an object flying backwards into the formation, again, something that shouldn't be done, which was caught by many different cameras, because obviously it was an air display. So, very, very interesting. They're taking a major interest in our technology.
It's kind of an elephant in the room. For example, you may see behind me a picture. This is my chosen background for this particular call. You see like a series of lights in a circle. Yeah. Now, if I move my head slightly, you see there's a large light in the middle. Now, this was actually captured on a space shuttle mission, I think sometime in the 1980s. And what you see is these objects, the video of it is quite extraordinary, because you see the objects around the perimeter appear and start flashing their lights, and then the big one in the middle then suddenly starts. It's almost it's like they're flying in formation, and it's almost like they were giving a signal to the crew of the space shuttle. That's what it looked like to me. It's an extraordinary piece of footage. You've not seen it. Published by NASA. NASA, you know what NASA said? Well, they didn't try to suppress this. I mean, this was actually part of their. They just said that's ice crystals from the craft.
Right.
It dumps some ice. It's basically wastewater, urine, that kind of thing. Sometimes it forms crystals. You can see these things moving in an intelligent manner. It's not ice crystals.
Now, you actually monitored a 4-hour live stream of NASA discussing UFOs, didn't you, Ben, very recently?
It's just
So
a couple
how
of
did
days.
that go?
Well, it's just a couple of. Ironically, it was just a couple of days before the Grusch article came out and the interview on News Nation. It was, well, put it this way: at the end of it, I was 4 hours older and I had nothing to show for it. It was. I thought, well, what's the point? What's happened is NASA's put together what they call an independent study, and led by a physicist called David Spergel, and they basically reinvented the wheel. Really, they just plodded around in circles, going over, saying things that people said before, the usual sort of things. Can't be identified. We don't know what they are. No evidence that are alien. And this went on, even though they had people there, including they had a couple of astronauts there, and Sean Kirkpatrick was there. The astronauts was a very skeptical style. They just said, well, when I was in space, I didn't see anything weird. And none of the other astronauts have said anything they saw anything weird, which is not true, because we have at least a dozen astronauts saying they saw strange things in space. Buzz Aldrin, Story Musgrove, Gordon Cooper, Gennady Strakalov, many, many others. But the end of it, at the end, really didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. At the end, the NASA administration just said, "Oh yeah, NASA is doing everything we can. We're not covering anything up because someone from the audience so you like cutting your feeds and things like this when UFOs appear so that people can't see it, because you do live streams. They seem to just disappear at certain times." And he said, "Oh yeah, they sometimes lose touch with the transmitter on the ground, and that's why they cut off." And well, my response, if I'd have been there, would have been, well, they seem to disappear at convenient times, because often just before they go down, something strange appears in the camera. Is that a coincidence? Is it?
And also, if it's on, say, the space shuttle or the International Space Station, and you're going to pass over a regular spot each time, over certain stations that are tracking you from the Earth, you would know, I would presume, that if you lose your feed at a regular point going around the Earth because you're out of whatever, that would come up at a regular point as it goes through its orbit, wouldn't it?
You'd know when it would happen, yeah. You'd know in advance when you were going to have to cut off, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also others. I mean, there's the witnesses who've spoken out about this. There's also some, amateur people. In the days before they encrypted transmissions, amateur radio people would actually pick these things up. There's some guys in Greece who used to pick up secret Russian space transmissions in the 60s, even before Yuri Gagarin. But there was an interesting one. Some guys picked up something from the space shuttle once, and this was when John Blaha was the actual space shuttle captain. Now what they have, you said, they do even back in those days, they had an encrypted channel. It was called the medical channel, because they this was discussing the health of the astronauts. But of course, it could be used for discussing other classified materials. And the amateur people were like, the amateur radio hams were monitoring the shuttle, listening to the astronauts talking for fun. And then they heard Blaha, and it is his voice, say, "Houston, this is Discovery. We have the alien spacecraft under observance."
Wow.
And my guess is what happened then was they called back and says, John, you're not on the medical channel. You're on the public channel. Shut up. And he went, "Oh, sorry. Because I literally think he forgot that he was not on the medical channel. And he said something on the public channel he shouldn't have.
I thought they called them bogies.
Now that was Gordon Cooper. Bogies at 10 o'clock high, he said. Yeah, and this is weird because this goes back to the old X-15 test. Now this was a suborbital spacecraft that was launched in the early 60s before the Mercury missions, which was America's first manned space mission. Darcy Weir has done a really good documentary about this. What the pilots of these craft, now these were like, they couldn't go to orbit. They were jet powered, and they flew up to a very, very high level, and they would fly on a ballistic trajectory and spend probably 10 minutes in space before having to come down again. Very similar to Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic. And the pilot was told, when you take this camera and photograph anything strange you see. And this was like really weird, because obviously during this mission he'd be very, very busy, because those 10 minutes in space he'd need to do a lot of tests, he'd get a lot of data, take readings and things like that. But NASA were telling him basically to do this, and then when he got back he could only tell certain people, and he had to hand the camera over to the CIA. This is that's as early as like 1960 and things like that, when the X-15 project was underway.
There's another kind of like semi-conspiracy theory you could bolt onto the original Apollo mission. So this thing when they get back from their alleged moon landings, and they had the press briefing, and they look completely in a trance hypnotic state. So somebody could argue possibly that maybe there were moon landings, they did actually land there, they did do their thing, they saw aliens, interacted with aliens, but obviously we can't let the astronauts blurt that out to the public, so we'll kind of wipe their memories, and that's why they're hypnotized. So that's another little angle that you could come.
Well, obviously, both conspiracies can't be true, whether they are mutually exclusive. But my own view is that they weren't on the moon. However, there is evidence to suggest that. I mean, I do believe that Apollo 11 went into space with Armstrong and Aldrin on board, and indeed, Buzz Aldrin reported that they did actually see something strange when they were up in space, and I've got no reason to disbelieve him. I don't believe he went to the moon, but I believe he was in Earth orbit and he saw something strange, and he actually said so. He actually said so later that something was actually following the Apollo 11 spacecraft, which they didn't know what it was.
I thought there was some sort of post-analysis of that, and they thought it might have been something like the second or third stage of the Saturn V, because obviously these things they're separating from these things at certain parts of the mission as they go around in orbit, but these things are still traveling with them, because obviously they're still like projectiles in space as such, so they're still traveling at 17,000 miles an hour, and the ship or the capsule is undocking from it, so it just travels that little bit faster, but these things are trailing off, and eventually that orbit starts to decay of that third stage, and they kind of look out the window and see something, like, oh, what's that? And they're not quite sure, because by that time it's perhaps almost like a tiny glinting star or rotating object or whatever it may be. So a lot of the ground stations presume or estimated it to be, debris from the actual launch itself, which is, it's not impossible. As it could be.
Well, the reason I think that's not the case is it's Aldrin himself, and in fact, this is actually on the radio record of Apollo 11. You actually hear him contacting Houston and saying, "Houston, could you tell us the location of the third stage of our rocket," or some words to that effect? Because he and Armstrong and the other guy, the guy everyone forgets because he was they were all looking out the window at this thing and saying, and they wanted to check what it was. They didn't want to say they'd seen a UFO on it because they didn't have the secret channel in those days, but they asked Mission Control to verify that this was not that very thing. And Mission Control did say, no, it's actually 6,000 miles away from you. You shouldn't be able to see it.
Right.
There's another conspiracy theory that you could bolt onto this as well. And this would be from the people that believe that we did land on the moon. Have you heard of the one where people have claimed that they've heard astronauts say, we did land and we saw massive structures and there were alien structures there, so there's that aspect as well. There's so many different camps with this, isn't there? You've got the camp that believes that we absolutely did not go to the moon and it was all a complete hoax. We've got the camp that says we did go to the moon, but there's no alien structures, and then we've got the camp that says we did go to the moon, but there are alien structures. So there's
it's obviously all these things can't be true. So,
so which is true? What do you think, Ben? Did you think we went?
I'm from the first. I don't believe that the Apollo missions went to the moon.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean there aren't strange things on the moon. I believe there's some interesting stories about what was seen on the dark side of the moon. Now, this is the dark. Well, it's called the dark side, but it actually does get as much sunlight as the near side. It's actually the far side facing away. Yeah. Let's say if you were an alien, theoretically coming to Earth, this would be the perfect place to set up some kind of forward operating position, because it's a large area. It's almost next door to the Earth in cosmic terms. And it's one of the few places in the universe that is completely invisible from the Earth's surface for a reason other than sheer distance. Yeah. So if theoretically, if we were being visited by creatures from distant planets, they would probably set up some kind of, and they wanted to remain hidden from us, they would set up some kind of base on the far side. Yeah.
Actually, you've got a fourth camp with this.
Oh my God!
You got the secret space theory. You got the theory that actually that what we're getting in the news and the technology that we think is available is actually centuries, possibly millennia behind what really exists, and there's like another, if you like, rung above us in the technological realms where huge technology does exist, and we whiz about all over the place in secret space program UFO type spaceships, and maybe some of the UFOs that we're looking at are actually part of that. Who knows?
Well, I have no idea that the secret government is far advanced of what's available publicly. But I don't.
Look, maybe this is getting back to those recovered craft that we've been discussing, that, if we have recovered technology, as this guy has been stating, it's not out the realms of possibility. I mean, I have heard that, what Bob Lazar was talking about was that, I think he quoted like a Wednesday evening or something, that he said, he told his friends, he said, look, if you don't believe me, come out to S4, Area 51 on a Wednesday evening with me, and I'll show you them test flying these craft. And they were actually witnessed, and they videoed them, and I think they got arrested by the security people there. So it does seem obvious that once you've got these craft, captured or retrieved in some way, you are going to look at them and try and work out how they're functioning. So it's not out the realms of speculation to suggest that, some of the craft up there are us testing them out, and they'd rather you blame it on an alien craft rather than you sort of say, I think that's US technology or something, because they don't want you to know about their technology. I mean, a lot was said about that, for instance, when people saw the SR-71 Blackbird shooting across the sky, they'd rather you think it was an alien craft rather than you actually identified it as a stealth aircraft of the US Air Force at the time.
Well, but if you get an identification wrong, certainly. I mean, Dr. Stephen Greer actually just released a new movie where he talks about what he calls he calls UFOs AEPDs, alternative energy propulsion devices. That's something like as if we need another new name for them. Now, of course, I think some UFOs probably are secret aircraft. Not all, but there are. Now, there's quite a fashionable theory actually going around that the modern UFO culture and mythology is simply a piece of literally engineered neo-mythology created by the CIA to launder them more down-to-earth projects like spacecraft and spy planes and things like that. Doesn't really make sense because you'd essentially be drawing people's attention towards something with the ultimate objective of deflecting it away. It wouldn't work, I don't think. I mean, because if that theory is correct, it means Bob Lazar was put out there to draw people's attention away from Area 51. Hasn't worked very well, has it?
No.
Everyone's looking at Area 51 now, including people who don't believe in aliens and think and they're now very interested in these covert aircraft being developed there.
What happened to that? Do you remember the Area 51 group?
Yes.
Nothing happened with that, did it?
Well, it was just Bob. The thing about it was they had this thing called Alien Stock, which is like a music festival and like just basically a party in the middle of the desert. Luckily, no one actually tried to storm Area 50.
Yeah,
it would have been a disaster. It would have been an absolute disaster if they did. But what happened was they had this thing called Alien Stock. They said, we'll come back next year and make it a regular event. Then there was the lockdown. But apparently it has resumed. It's the guy who did it. He's only 17 or something at the time. When you're now. Apparently there are plans to do a new to make this a regular thing, which should be fun. I mean, as long as people don't actually try to storm Area 51.
Yeah,
that's just a joke.
It's such a huge place, so if everyone attended, it's like, well, which part of the fence do they actually storm? Because it's like acres. This place, isn't it? It's like trying to get into Glastonbury, but 20 times more difficult.
It's a 14-mile walk from the extraterrestrial highway for a start across open desert, which is something either very hot or very cold, and there's no water. The camo dudes, the security guards, I think if they saw lots of people running towards the base, they are authorized to open fire, and they would, and there would be a massacre.
It would be a PR disaster, though, wouldn't it? It would be a Tiananmen Square, but for alien.
Oh God, it would be yes, it would. It would be very, very sad, and probably. They probably clamp down on us even more.
I think what they would probably... This is what I think they'd probably do. If they knew that there was going to be a massive group of people invading Area 51, I think what they'd do, they would draft in lots of National Guard and Army waiting. I don't think they'd actually shoot them and kill them. I don't think they'd do that. I think what they'd do is mass arrests. They'd have coaches waiting. They'd just arrest them all. And they'd either all go to jail or have a massive fine.
Well, that's actually what happened. The police came out in force.
Yeah.
With for that day, they actually in the end they only arrested 6 people. They were preparing to arrest thousands if necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But basically, it turned into a very good-natured pageant, really, where everyone had a good laugh. It was quite fun. It was. Now, if you talk about Area 51 on YouTube, for instance, you get the little box, the Wikipedia box underneath.
Oh yeah,
like that. So yeah, and I think if there had been some kind of humanitarian disaster, it needn't be someone getting shot. It could be, just imagine, like, if 500 people turned up at Rachel, the little village, which is like 70 miles from anywhere. I mean, they all turned up there, went to the alien. The problem is there's a petrol station there, but it probably doesn't have that much petrol in stock. So how would you get those people back? And how much, how much food is actually in Rachel to feed these people? And it could be something like that. They maybe, if you're in that little town 70 miles from anywhere and you can't get back, and you could end up there, they'll run out of food, and then there'll be starvation and things like that, or they'll try walking back, which will probably end up the same way. They'd end up dying on the way. Things like that. It's just little problems like that they all had to think about.
On a slightly different note, have you heard of the really crazy shit behind the history of night vision? Have you heard of this?
No, I know night vision, but I didn't know the history of it. I know what.
So, this is kind of relevant to the alien and the UFO thing. Night vision, I thought it was a fairly recent thing. My guess would have been kind of 1970s, 1980s. Actually, no, night vision goes way back to at least the 1930s, possibly before then. Did you know that the Germans and the Americans both had night vision on the warfield in the Second World War? They were huge. I mean, the scopes are absolutely massive, bigger than the actual gun, but you could actually bolt on a night vision scope to your gun, so that it goes way, 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 way back. Anyway, skip a couple of decades to the Vietnam War. The military decided to play about with what was the best color to use for night vision, because we know it as black and green, but they were experimenting with kind of blue and black, white and black, yellow and black, and red and black. This is where it gets proper tinfoil hat crazy. When they went with red and black, so if you imagine night vision, but it's red tints instead of green tints, and they gave it to their helicopter pilots who were sober and not on drugs and not on LSD. And I thought this was complete BS, but it was actually raised.
I'm getting some strange background noise. I don't know where it's coming from.
Oh,
hang on one sec.
Can you hear me?
I know what it is.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Let me just. It's a page I had open. Hang on. Let's get close.
Okay.
All right.
It was a live stream waiting to start. Sorry, I should have shut that.
That's right. So basically they were experimenting with red and black night vision, and they gave it to these helicopter pilots who were sober and not on drugs. And the reason I say that is they then started seeing, quote, winged beings flying around the jungles. This was raised on the Joe Rogan show, and I thought that can't be real. Did a little bit of diving. Actually, yes, it was real. You can find reports on this. They were seeing these winged beings, and the helicopter gunners were actually shooting into thin air. So if you take the goggles off, there's nothing there. If you put these red and black night vision goggles on, you see these winged beings that look. They describe them as demons and dragons flying around. They were shooting, and they weren't there. So then they switched over to the green and black. Now, the winged beings, the demons, disappeared. You couldn't see them anymore. But guess what you could see? You could see the UFOs.
Wow.
So then we kind of like skip forward to, a few recent documentaries, even one with Danny Dyer, which was quite interesting. And they set up these tripods with these green and black, what I would call kind of normal, regular, everyday, what we would refer to as night vision. And you'd see in the sky these bright objects flying around, happy as Larry, and you move the camera away and you look with your naked eye and there's nothing there. You can still see the stars. The stars are illuminated, and you can see the stars through the night vision, but you can only see these UFO objects through the night vision. So, and don't forget, night vision, especially green and black ones, pick up infrared. So maybe they're picking up frequencies of light that we can't see with the naked eye.
Well, that's incredible. Our friend Nick Hayes would be very interested.
The Invisibles, yeah.
He deals with phenomena that do not appear in visible light. They only appear in the electromagnetic spectrum away from visible light. But we're clearly dealing with something that only, like I said, it can't be seen except in certain wavelengths. In other words, because if you've got red is a very low wavelength.
Yeah,
it's a long wavelength as opposed to blue, which is the high wavelength. That to me is really it's indicates they have some kind of ability to disguise themselves and can only be seen on certain wavelengths. And
it's also fascinating because traditionally people have thought about UFOs and aliens as kind of like a distance thing. They live in, a galaxy, billions and billions of light years away. But if we then kind of like not exactly merge, but we kind of view these things as perhaps multi-dimensional, or in the same realms as ghosts and spirits and that kind of thing. If we take the principle that the length of distance for one little spaceship to come across is going to be too vast to do it in terms of, even with high technology, but instead doing it multidimensionally, i.e. kind of disappearing from one space and appearing in another space. How they do it, I don't know, in the same way that a spirit or a ghost might. Then we're into some really strange realms here, because are we dealing with beings or UFOs from the physicality of far-flung places, or are we dealing with multidimensional beings? Now we're entering in a whole new world of the possibility of angels and demons and extra dimensionals.
Yeah, I actually saw the documentary you're talking about with Danny Dyer. It was he was Win Keach actually who does these various things with cameras and stuff. But yeah, I mean the thing is, if in order to traverse the great distances in space, you need to use wormholes. Wormholes do exist in theory, and there's nothing. They're called the Einstein-Rosen bridge, because the Einstein actually theorized with this guy called Rosen that they could be created, which would actually bypass space-time. And the ability to be able to go through this wormhole and get somewhere a lot quicker than you would have otherwise. Alternatively, if we live in a multiverse where there's different universes occupying the same space on higher dimensions, the wormhole also could access those as well, and which will allow beings from other universes to access ours. So yeah, I mean, there's this strange crossover between other paranormal phenomena that fascinates me. John Keel wrote a lot about this. I mean, the difference, I suppose, would be that UFOs also have like a physical presence. They have they appear to be solid objects. They leave marks on the ground, for example. They also, the pilots, the occupants, seem to be biological entities which leave footprints, for example. And when sometimes they die and they leave behind a corpse.
Yeah.
Which, of course, ghosts and angels don't. So I find that.
Although you say ghosts and angels don't, though, but sometimes with poltergeist activities, you do get the physical manifestation of beings or objects being moved in this reality, this 3D reality, by the ethereal beings themselves. And some, don't you? That's it. And you get some people, because there's different types of ghosts, isn't there? There's orbs of light, you've got shadows, you've got translucent where you can see the background, but you've also got solid ones. And in terms of the physicality of things, there are some reports of people, for instance, in life-threatening situations where, the angel kind of lifted the car up and I was able to get out. Well, the angel did this and I was able to get out. And then they'd ask the police or the paramedics, where was that tall blonde guy? Where was he? What tall blonde guy? What are you talking about? So there can be, weirdly, some physical interactions from what you might call ghosts and spirits, in the same way that aliens kind of have a physical presence.
Well, the Bible actually mentions angels in what I can't remember where in the Bible, but it mentions aliens eating. Sorry, not aliens, angels. Angels.
Angels. It's eating. Yeah. Okay. So
angels eating, which of course indicates they can manifest in a physical form. Yeah. Yeah, and of course reports we know about, like we discussed Helen Duncan before, about how at the Skull experiment, she apparently came through and gave everyone a newspaper from the 1940s, and it was an authentic one too, printed on the right kind of paper with the right kind of ink, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Now, as we draw to a close, just the final thoughts on this, the retrieved sources, if they are retrieved sources as such. Leslie Keane was the one that was sort of on this story as well. She was asked if it was a soft disclosure. Is that what they're heading to? I mean, would you agree it's kind of a soft disclosure, these reports now coming through?
To be honest, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping it is literally some kind of herald, some kind of experiment to see how people react before they go to the next step.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know that's the case, but that's what I hope for. I mean, the evidence does indicate that's the case, actually. And I know I'm biased, and this could be wishful thinking, but I've looked at the other side of the story. I've looked at what other people have said, and it doesn't fit. There's no other reason why this guy would do that. See what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the skeptics have this strange thing about saying, why are they interested in us? All these aliens, why would they travel the vast distances of the universe? I mean, they're making assumptions, that they're traveling vast distances of the universe to come and visit us, when in fact, they might actually be here already. And I mean, certainly many of the books I've read suggest that the saucer craft, at least, the flying saucers, typical flying saucers, are actually craft just to maneuver around in our atmosphere anyway. They have not traversed the universe, and they could be, like you say, on bases on the backside of the moon. So they haven't got far to come, really. But these people, in their closed-minded way, seem to think that these little flying saucers have traversed the universe through time and space or whatever, when, there's bases here, allegedly. There's many reports of flying saucers going into mountains, into volcanoes, under the sea. They're not often seen shooting up straight up into space. They seem
and also
horizontally.
Yeah, they are seen in space sometimes, covered it out of the Earth's atmosphere, but they're not seen like large ones coming in through the solar system have not been spotted by astronomers. And also, I mean, if they're coming through wormholes, we don't know where the ends of these wormholes are. They could be very close. They could be very close to it. They could even be on the Earth. I mean, they could don't even need to be in space at all. And as you said, there's signs they go to places like under the sea all the time. They fly into places. The final scene of that documentary with Danny Dyer, and by the way, that's an awful piece of casting. I really must admit that. I saw a fucking UFO. Yeah. He's at the East Setty Ranch. He's at the East Setty Ranch, and he actually does witness some of the phenomena that James Gilliland's team have observed. And
this is the thing. I mean, the point about the Danny Dyer episode is not really him, and it's, what he believes in is kind of like irrelevant to us, really. It's the footage. It's when you see the footage, and it was a mountain that these not beings, I don't know what they are, UFOs were flying in and out of, that you couldn't see with the naked eye.
That's exactly. This is what several people like Trevor James Constable, who was the pioneer of this kind of ufology, talked about, and other people have as well. Nick Hayes, I think, is carrying on the work of Constable, and indeed Leon Southgate. So, I think that's I think, no doubt, it could be. We'll find out more about that. It could be the government. I'm sure they know about this sort of thing already.
Well, stay tuned to this channel and also to Ben's channel. Ben, if people want to know more about you, how can they find out about you?
Well, you go to HPAGNWO, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, HPAGNWO. You just put it into Google, you'll find everything. Don't forget to read my book, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, available at all good bookshops now, priced £10, which is about the subjects we talk about on this program, but it's a fictional scenario in which people got the truth instead of the lies.
Cool. And also your YouTube channel.
Yes, Ben the JR
Reporter.
Ben the JR Porter, yeah.
Porter. I always want to say reporter because it's the R in the JR Porter. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So you're going to be doing a lot more live streams as this story unfolds. So I'm going to try and keep an eye on that.
Yes.
Well, hopefully, if Philip Kinsella and his brother Ronnie Kinsella can make it, unfortunately, they had to cancel the season. So hopefully, we might be able to get one in part 2 of this program. If not, it'll just be us. But we'll hopefully get one in part 2, discussing the same topics from their angle. But for the moment, Ben, thanks very much for joining us on the Paranormal Peep Show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Andy and Neil.
See you later.
Cheers. Stay tuned for part 2.
Today's the best day of my life. Woohoo! Listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Join Andy and Neil every month on the Paranormal Peep Show, part of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, for fun, frolics, and lots of information about weird stuff, UFOs, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night and everything associated with them. Fascinating guests, fascinating talk, fascinating information.
Hi, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show Part 2 on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And this time we're joined with Philip Kinsella, who joins us from Bedfordshire. Philip, hello, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Neil. I'm very well, and thank you once again for inviting me on your wonderful show. It's wonderful. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, you're the host of Twin Souls, so you're kept busy with your brother Ronnie presenting and hosting that and discussing all sorts of manner of things. And one of the things that you discuss quite a lot, either on your show or outside the field of that, like through your books or presentations, is the subject of UFOs as well, which you have a great interest in. So obviously this story has broken with this David Grusch, who is this alleged whistleblower. But I mean, Ben says he's not a whistleblower because he's doing it through the proper channels of trying to get this story out. Now, but David Grusch is this former, I believe he's a former intelligence officer. That's working for the US government with the UAP kind of task force, as it were, which is a unidentified aerial phenomenon program, and they were tasked with bringing to the public through Congress their research and findings. But he came to the conclusion, with talking to various people, that they were not given all the information that they should be. And he thought it was a bit of a travesty. So this is why he's come forward. And basically, through the protections of Congress and various acts that are being passed, now breaking this story through where he says that the US and other countries do have crashed UFOs, to put it bluntly. And how did you find out about the story, and what's your thoughts on it?
Oh, well, I did hear whispering starting on the internet. But then, of course, you sent me a link where I was really able to have a look at this. And that's where I found it. So I found it through you, Neil, because I heard these rumors going through the internet. And but I was rather curious as to why David Grusch now would come forward with these allegations. I mean, this is, we're talking about the Roswell era, 1947. And of course, we know of the subsequent programs that were initiated, Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, and, which were supposed to be investigating the reality of UFO or now UAP phenomena. And we get to this stage now where we've got this very high intelligence officer, and his credentials do check out, who is now stating that he wants the world to know that we are in possession of at least 12 crafts. What was interesting was the nature of the information that came forward from him, stating that some of them are triangular, some of the classic disc shape, and one even very much like one of our very own helicopters. And also stating about the pilots. Now, anyone remotely interested within the UFO phenomena would do absolutely anything to be in the presence of not only that hardware, but also to see and look upon the pilots themselves. But we're now seeing a downplay of this. Every single time that we have someone, and in this instance, I have to state that David Grusch is one of the most highest level within the military establishment core units that has come forward to spill the beans, so to speak. And we're now seeing a downplaying of this whole drama where, of course, the Pentagon and those officials that govern within, what we would call US Parliament, although it's are now at pains to cover this up. So, and we also have to understand that this information has come from secondhand sources. So David Grusch has not himself seen the actual hardware or the pilots. He has been informed by those other members of personnel within his units that have confided in him. And are we to doubt him? No, I don't think so. I mean, why would this gentleman come forward now and spill the beans? But of course, you'll get a lot of people that's going to start speculating, thinking that this is a false flag. Some people are talking about the build-up to some kind of fabricated, holographic alien invasion. And it's got messy, which it normally does within the field of UFO research. Whatever happens with any case, you'll find that there is a yes and there is a no. And, there is never any definitive answers that we can gain. And this is puzzling. So I think personally, a lot of what David is talking about is factual. I think he comes across as very frustrated. He's certainly now a marked man in terms of like him stepping forward and coming out of line of the job that he, specifically worked for, the work that he did, because he's gone against his official bosses. But we're seeing again the Pentagon, and of course denying, or them now blaming someone else, that it's another corporation that has this information that we can't get our hands on, and it's always someone else. It's always like a paper trail where you can never actually find where this ends. This is the whole thing. So I think it's very interesting. I think going back also, we have to realize something truly extraordinary did start to begin before Grusch announced these spectacular claims just recently. I mean, I know that he's been in the movement for some time. But when we had those balloons coming over America and then they were subsequently shot down, there was another object that was about the size of a vehicle that supposedly came down in some kind of water And we didn't hear any more about that. But what's interesting is the fact that the news media here in England, I know as well in America and other countries, but here in England for the first time, they were stating categorically that they had shot down a UFO. Now, a balloon is a balloon. So, it's rather like Roswell, but in reverse, where it was a disc and then they blamed it on the Mogul weather balloon. So secret, in fact, going back to 1947, the military didn't even know anything about the whereabouts of where this secret experimental object was, I might add. I think that was the beginning of some kind of psychological program or disinformation campaign, most notably conspiracy theorists. And that was I know that was created through JFK, through his unfortunate demise. But it was strange that the news channels were using UFO, and then all of a sudden, all the ufologists' ears pricked up, all the researchers thinking, hang on a minute, what are they talking about? And I thought that was very strange, even back then, that they'd actually admit it. And then, you kind of like have to step back and state, well, the news channels have never admitted on national primetime news that a UFO or two UFOs have been shot down. It's always been what it has been that's been shot down, an aircraft or a balloon or something else. So I'm not so sure. I'm quite suspicious about this sudden turn of events in terms of all of this now starting to come out. What is this?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like the UFOs over Canada or wherever these objects were, that's like the starter meal. And now we've been offered the main course, and I'm just wondering what the dessert will be.
Well, as long as we're not the main course.
Yeah, or the dessert.
Well, it is fascinating, I think, because we have to also ask the question as to why, again, that question, why David has come forward. Obviously, he himself has been witness to this information. Obviously, he's seen photographic evidence. He's seen the documentation. And of course, because his hands are tied, along with many others, it does seem to me that there are others within his group or within those group establishments who do feel that it's wrong that the public are not told the truth. And he also said, didn't he, that the Vatican know about this as well, which wouldn't surprise me in the least. But I think the public now are ready. I don't think they would give a hoot if the world suddenly announced that, yes, we are in possession of UFO hardware, and that we have obviously the bodies, the pilots in some form of cryogenic freeze. I doubt very much if they're alive. But this opens up the door to other questions that even David, I think himself, may not be able to answer. He seemed at pains to discuss matters. One of the interesting things he pointed out was the fact that subcontracted scientific units had been brought in to try and replicate the technology, and they couldn't, which calls into question, most notably, the triangular UFO sightings that we have, the TR3s, which most people assume are back-engineered alien technology. Well, if his statement is true, then it means to say that we haven't yet reversed this technology, and that what people have been seeing is actually the real thing. But I don't know, because you have some researchers stating that there's some kind of secret space program, that we have reversed the technology from alien craft or non-human craft, non-terrestrial crafts, as they like to call it. So, we're going to find ourselves in some deep, muddy waters until we have some transparency with regards to the facts behind this. And even if those facts were brought forward, even if David was able to bring these facts forward, I doubt that the public would believe him anyway, because people want to see it with their own eyes. They want to handle it, and that's not going to happen. So, but I think it's interesting that he has such a very high-ranking position, and that something spooked him, or he's, obviously telling the truth. Unless, of course, there is another program, a psychological program in place to make us all believe that we're seeing it their way. And once again, we've all been had. We don't know.
I almost get the impression the fact that these people that are confided in him because he worked for the UAP task force, and it was one of his jobs to try and collate all this material, and basically it's like all these people within this crashed retrieval area were basically, like you're saying, they just want the word to get out or something. Because remember, these are not the same people, of course, that were involved with Roswell. These are younger people of our generation who come through with different sets of morals, and we're not at war with this, that, and the other. We're maybe at war with other people now or something, but they're coming through with a different set of, they're not all going to hush it up now. Maybe there was an argument back then with the Russians about hushing this sort of stuff up because it was new to them. But now they've got at least 75 years of this kind of stuff to collate through and go through. And the people that are coming onto these teams now that have got to investigate them have got different ideas about, how do they want to leave this world? Do they want to leave it a secret, or are they going to kick this problem further down the road like a tin can for another generation to pick up? Or are they going to actually break new ground and say, no, we're going to stop this and we want this to now become partly public in some way? And it's like these people that they've confided in, they've all gone up to him and broken their bits of information to him one by one. And even he said, yes, I have seen documents. People said, oh, he hasn't seen anything. But he actually says in the interview, yes, I've been presented with documents and other things.
Yes, that's right.
And I presumed he meant video or photographs or something of that nature. So he has seen some sort of qualifying evidence, although, like you say, he hasn't got the keys to the cabinet to bring these things forth. But now there's other journalists out there that are now being approached by people who are saying pretty much the same thing. But then again, 30 plus years ago, we had Bob Lazar, who was pretty much telling us the same kind of story. That
yes, he was saying that we had reverse engineered the technology. David is telling us that we haven't been able to do that. So, where do we draw that line? I wouldn't doubt, that the US military have tried in every way possible to replicate these crafts or the engineering of them. That is interesting. But the other interesting fact that we have to look at, Neil, is the fact that if this is true, then we have been lied to, and also not just lied to. My big question is, where are they coming from? And remember, he said there were different factions, different species of alien. So we then have to ask the question: if they're not getting us through to us through space, as in the conventional space that we see in terms of space travel, how are they doing it? I mean, we bring into the fray interdimensional connections, which I think are very important, but also that would state that NASA have also lied to us, because they've engineered this new interest or this new program to study the UAP phenomena. But come on, I mean, if these crafts have been entering our stratosphere, they would know about it because of all of the satellite technology out there. And I think that if this is the case, then it shows that there's been a huge, massive operation to, hoodwink the public, the general public, that's us, into the belief that there's nothing going on out there. And the other thing, just a very simple thing here, they've got such technology to allegedly take pictures on Mars, but not the moon, and we've got to, people have to ask the right questions. I know we're stepping slightly away from the UAP question with David Grusch, but these questions, this will then start a barrage of other things that will be opened. Cans of worms will start to be opened. So if you've told us that we now have alien technology, we have the hardware and we have the pilots, and we want to know how they're getting here. And if we do find out how they're getting here, we're then going to start questioning other organizations, powerful organizations. Well, you must have known about this, and this is going to start something really big rolling. So, I mean, I've got to look at it both ways. And I don't think any one of us are an expert, whatever line of inquiry you have within the UAP or UFO area of study. I don't think any of us are. But we have an awareness and understanding of the phenomena. And it is fascinating, I think, because this has given us all hope that someone has, let things out and feels that the public need to know the truth. But will we get that truth? Once again, we may come round to a part like on the X-Files where Mulder and Scully have the evidence, they've got it, and then the last part, it's all gone. It's disappeared. What they thought they had has been changed to something that most people will then accept as truth. So, we're seeing this wheel going round again. So I do feel sorry for David Grusch. I mean, I would like and hope to believe that his intentions are admirable, but there is a part where other people will now start coming in and will bring him down. I've already had a look today, and there's a lot of stuff coming out saying that they're not taking his account seriously, and it's a load of old rubbish, this type of thing. But, why would he come out with this? And of course, and we're not just talking about a major or general here or someone in that kind of like link with the US military. We're talking about someone who is even above the Pentagon, who has these or are able to have these top secret clearance levels that we, the public, could ever dream of. So I think it's very interesting, and I think it's fascinating. And, most of us are just sitting back and watching the show, as it were, and seeing what happens, what comes out. That's all we can do.
I drew parallels actually with him and Bob Lazar actually because David said in his interview that unfortunately some people researching on these projects, trying to establish how they're working, these devices, UFOs, craft, call them what you will, have unfortunately died in their services because of they've somehow been killed accidentally during the course of their investigations. And that reminded me back to when Bob Lazar said he was recruited by S4 or whatever they were called for the Dreamland Area 51 area, because he was recruited to replace a guy that had been killed investigating a UFO back then.
Yes.
So that kind of drew a parallel to me, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So Bob Lazar, it does sound like Bob Lazar's story is credible. Although
I don't doubt him. I just think that what Grusch has said compared to Lazar, there are differences of opinion, obviously, that Lazar states that he worked on back engineering this technology, and Grusch is saying that we haven't been able to replicate that. It could be that he was only privy to certain parts of information and that not all of it, because I respect that completely, most definitely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Lazar was basically, from my understanding, they were trying to understand how it all worked, and they were sort of breaking it down to its bare components.
Yes.
I don't think he said they'd built anything from anything, although they were managing to test fly some of the craft they had recovered, but they hadn't made their own craft independently as a result of it. I don't think they'd got that far at that point.
Reminds me of the series called Taken, and I've got that, Steven Spielberg, and there was this one part where the US military had one of these alien crafts. So they brought in these psychic twins, ladies, to try and use their minds and then the next thing you saw them dead. So I think that this happens to a lot of the people that get involved with this type of phenomena, So it's like, oh, good Lord, here we go again.
Yeah, you're going to get your fingers burnt from something. If it's not the Earth people burning your fingers, it's the aliens in some way. Which actually brings me to the point where he said that these creatures or aliens or pilots, someone asked, has anyone ever come to harm? And he said, yes.
Yes.
Some of them have killed human beings.
Correct. Yeah.
And I thought, now that's very interesting. Spooky, scary. He didn't sort of say who they were, but I mean, we've heard stories about reptilians killing people, that kind of thing. The human mutilations. I mean, this is stuff that we've all known as ufologists for years through all the various books. But it's now just simmering through to the public consciousness, and I don't know what they're going to make of it, but we've kind of known a lot of this stuff over the years, haven't we?
Yes, we have. And it's not just the love and light nature of contact. It's also the other side that has to be addressed, that must be addressed. I've had some people that believe in this is going to create a huge divide, because we find ourselves as researchers being attacked by those who see these beings as nothing more than benevolent in nature. I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I will say to you is that the aspects that we've been dealing with, most notably myself, has been the darker area, and there are reasons behind that. Even if most people don't want to acknowledge that as fact, we have to be open to all forms of speculation when we're investigating something. You can't just be hoodwinked in one idea and one idea only, and that's it. I'm tunnel visioned. I can't see anything else. No, you can't do that. That was interesting and quite spooky as well.
So what's your expectations for the future? We've had the down balloons over Canada and objects being shot out the sky. Now this gentleman's now come forward with his accounts. Do you think, like you say, that it's opened up a can of worms, and in the next few months we're going to get other people bravely stepping forward with their stories?
Hard to say, Neil. As I said, we've been here before down this road so many times. Even with the release of the information from the Pentagon, from the Office of Special Investigations, with regards to the UAP phenomena, and that's gone all quiet. So I don't know. Will they close this all up? I don't know. The US intelligence seems quite strong and powerful. I mean, it's either a make or break situation. We don't know. I just hope that more people step forward for David and to categorically state for the record that these things are real. And that we know that for a fact, but it's time for us to know the truth. This will open up so much more for us, not only in terms of who we are and what we represent, and not the Sunday school version that we've been programmed to believe in. It's time now for us to wake up. It's time for us all to share this information and work together, as opposed to separate. No one has exclusive rights to the phenomena, you would think, but there are some people who feel that they need it. Or are we being protected from a terrible secret? That's another thing that we need to take into consideration. Are they doing it for our own safety and to keep us away from that horror? Sounds dramatic, but we have to consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oddly enough, I was obviously looking at the internet tonight and seeing the Daily Star's version of this story, and they'd got one of these little photographs of a crashed saucer, supplied by a photo agency or something. But it still said at the bottom, as I was going through the Daily Stars thing, breaking news, it said at the bottom of the webpage, Al Pacino, 78, has become a father again. And it's like, oh my God, breaking news of the day. So even we're still attracted to the Hollywood gossip above these recovered saucer stories.
That's
right.
So
the Daily Star think that we're interested to find this out. I mean, I couldn't give two hoots about Al Pacino becoming a father. But it's like, oh my God, can't they just drop that kind of angle?
Yeah. So I mean, that it's that is the thing. Breaking news is this revelation. They're not interested. They want their toy town, plastic world, programmed, units that are us humans. They see us just to go about our business and not ask any questions. Oh my God, it's such a goddamn nightmare, isn't it? It's just crazy. But I think we're in for exciting times, most definitely.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us on the Paranormal Peep Show. And you've been busy working on some books, haven't you? So are there any due out at the moment?
Well, I've got Terrestrial Trespassers coming out in February of 2024. I'm working on 2 other books at the moment. They're slow going, but we're getting there. On UFOs.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, well, we look forward to that. And we look forward to hearing more episodes of Twin Souls with yourself and Ronnie. Every month on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. It's always a great listen. So for anyone that also listens to us, listen to Philip and Ronnie on Twin Souls Radio, which is always interesting to listen to the guests you have on. They're always fascinating stuff. But thank you once again, Philip, for joining us on this exciting revelation that's come through. And we'll stay glued to our screens, I guess.
You bet. Well, we'll all be first in line. It'll be like a scene from Close Encounters at the end. I just wish that all the ufologists were there to see it, to be able to touch it and explore it and examine it. That would be anyone's dream, but that is just at the moment a dream.
Yeah, I was, as I said in part 1, I wonder what the late Stanton Friedman would make of all this.
Him.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, bless his heart. Well, I'm sure he's making something of it now over on the other side. So
absolutely,
we'll have to wait to ask him that question.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you once again, Philip. And join us next month on the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, where we'll have a guest talking about the Apollo moon landings. Were they real or were they? Good night.
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, voted #1 for paranormal podcasts in the UK.